Hello, this is the Death Row and Executions channel. I am Paco Rivera. You can also follow me on Facebook for updates and more Death Row news. There will be a link to my Facebook in the description below. You can also check out my other channel here on YouTube called The Maximum Sentence, where I cover recent crimes and convictions. There will be a link for that as well. Sometime in the year 1978, Edward Thomas James had already dropped out of high school and joined the Army, but he was later discharged from the Army for failure to conform, repeatedly refusing to follow orders. He then returned to his mother's house in Casselberry, Florida. Over the years, James was heavily involved with drugs and was considered very violent, often getting into fights. He was also arrested quite a few times for theft and other matters. However, he became good friends with a man named Timothy Dick, and by the summer of the year 1993, James needed a place to live, and Timothy introduced James to his mother, 58-year-old Elizabeth Ann Dick, known to everyone as Betty. And Betty rented a room in her house to Edward James. Now, Betty had 4 grandchildren. The 4 grandchildren were often in Betty's care and slept in her home. Several months later, on the night of September 19th, 1993, Edward James went to a party a few blocks away and became heavily intoxicated from drinking and doing crack cocaine or LSD. According to reports, this photo of Edward James was taken the afternoon before going to that party. When James returned home after midnight, late that night, now September 20th, it had been a night where Betty's 4 grandchildren were staying at the home and all 4 were asleep in the living room. One of the 4 children was Toni Marie Neuner, who was 8 years old. She was the daughter of a woman named Lisa Rose Neuner, one of Betty's daughters, who had married a man named Wayne Neuner. All 4 children in the home belonged to Lisa Rose. 2 boys from her first marriage, Jeray Pearson and David Pearson. I'm a little confused by this picture because if I got the story right, the boys should be older than the girls. And Lisa Rose's 2 girls from her second marriage to Wayne Neuner, Toni Marie and Wendy. By the way, the mother, Lisa Rose Neuner, died recently at the age of 58 in the year 2022. Anyway, going back to September 20, 1993, Edward James, now drunk and high from doing drugs, first went to the kitchen and made himself a sandwich before going to his room. Sometime later, he walked out of his room, went into the living room, and walked over to Toni Marie. And she woke up as he began strangling her, and she soon fell unconscious. James then carried her into his bedroom and proceeded to brutally violate her. Toni Marie would later die as a result of the strangulation. Now, I'm not sure what exactly was going through James's mind, but it's possible that he now knew that he was in serious trouble and needed to buy himself some time before fleeing the house by killing the only adult in the house. So he went into Betty Dick's bedroom, the grandmother, and while she was asleep, began striking her in the head with a heavy candlestick and stabbing her. According to James's confession, which you will see in a little while, Betty was yelling back at him, "Why, Eddie? Why? Why? Why?" Some reports state that James had also intended to brutally, indecently assault Betty as well. Betty's screams ended up waking Toni Marie's 9-year-old sister, Wendy Neuner, and Wendy went to the bedroom to see what was going on. James grabbed a hold of Wendy, tied her up, and placed her in another room. He then took a shower and got dressed. He steals Betty's purse, her jewelry, and also took her car. He was gone. At some point, little Wendy managed to untie herself, free herself, and she ran to her uncle's house, which was just a few doors down, to let him know what had happened. What a horrific sight those two young boys must have encountered after they woke up. Their grandmother, Betty, was stabbed 23 times. And Toni Marie was found, not wearing anything, tossed onto the floor like a rag between the bed and a wall of the room that Edward James was using. The manhunt was on, and 8 days later, on September 28, 1993, America's Most Wanted with John Walsh, remember that show? America's Most Wanted featured the manhunt for Edward James, and they soon began getting calls. Someone reported that he was pawning jewelry at a pawn shop in Indiana, and another called about him pawning jewelry in Colorado. So he was exchanging Grandma Betty's jewelry for cash. Then, on the day after America's Most Wanted aired that episode, a woman named Priscilla Valdez, who had also seen the America's Most Wanted episode, was in the state employment office in Bakersfield, California. She recognized Edward James, who by this time had no money, gas, or food, and was there to apply for a job. And she asked an employee at the employment agency to notify authorities. Priscilla stated that James was easy to recognize because of his teeth.
I was able to see the teeth, which was a dead giveaway, especially from seeing the program the evening before. I thought to myself, it can't be this person. Not in Bakersfield. Nothing ever happens here in Bakersfield. So then I went up to the counter to the lady and I told her, I need to use a phone. That gentleman sitting behind me to the left of me was just featured in last night's America's Most Wanted.
Edward James knew the jig was up, and he gave a full, detailed confession that was videotaped. It appears he did try to minimize his crime by talking about how intoxicated he was from booze and drugs, and has no memory of certain events from that night.
For what I did, there's nothing I could do to even begin to make it right. Or apologize or say I'm sorry. And I just soon come get me and put me out, man. Didn't do away with me. The sooner the better. She was like a niece to me, I sort of looked out for her if the other kids were picking on her. Hey, that one with all that wasn't just her, that was all the kids, I looked out for all of them. Because there's sick people out in this world. I killed Toni first. She was on the couch, and I remember, I don't know why I picked and chose, or if I did, or it was just the first one I reached for, and I just strangled her. And I remember she was like right there, and they say I raped her. And I remember we was talking, and it was, she was dead, and I figured, what the hell, why not? And then I did what I did. And then I went and killed Benny. I hit her with like a candlestick or something. And that woke her up. And then I killed her. I stabbed her.
Did she say anything to you?
Yeah, she asked me why. I told her, don't worry about it, just give up the ghost. And it's part of it's the anger that's tearing me up, it's like, why, why all this anger? I wish I could understand it. And the little girl, Wendy, had woke up. She'd seen what was going on, so I grabbed her and tied her up. She asked me if I wasn't going to hurt her brothers, and I said, no, I'm not going to hurt nobody else. I remember saying that. And then I told her she was there to tell what really happened.
2 years after the murders, in 1995, Edward Thomas James was sentenced to death. Elizabeth Ann Dick, Betty, according to family, was always willing to help out with her grandchildren and loved having them around. Family and friends said that she had an open heart and a generous spirit, but was perhaps too trusting, as she had graciously accepted Edward James, who she and others in the family called Eddie, as part of her family. As I said last week, there are 2 executions scheduled for March 20th. One is Edward James in Florida, and the other is Wendell Grissom in Oklahoma. A video on that case appeared on this channel a few days ago. Please remember to hit the subscribe button for more death row and upcoming execution stories. You can also follow me on Facebook for updates and more death row news. There will be a link for my Facebook in the description below. My name is Paco. Take care and bye for now.